Hello, everyone. We're going to start the Kubernetes service Firedrill, scenario number 5. This is a scenario about determining what version of the software is running in the cluster and the changes since the last deployed version. The scenario reads like this. I'll go ahead and share my screen. There was a recent problem with background job processing that we think may be due to a deployment. Help figure out exactly what version is running and the changes since the last deploy. Joining us are Henry and Mikkel. It's a light crew today, so I'm sorry to put you guys on the spot, but do either of you have any suggestions about where to look to find out what version is running on? Well, I guess because it's background job processing, it's Sidekick. So what version of Sidekick is running in the Kubernetes cluster?
What I would do is I would use kubectl to get the version of the actual Docker image that's running in production, and then work my way from there. So try to figure out how the image was built, which deployment, in which deployment the image was generated, and then find the relevant GitLab merge requests.
And then we are done. Yay.
Sounds okay, but it sounds pretty complicated to me. Like first you would, I guess you would first have to establish a tunnel to the cluster. So you would have to be set up for that, right?
Well,
to use kubectl.
Yeah. So first of all, I would I've already done that in the past, and we've got a runbook for it, and we suggest to do it before people go on call. So, and the way I would do it is I would, rather than establish a tunnel, because I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we're not supposed to establish tunnels to production. I would SSH to the console, and I've got kubectl config there to access different production clusters. So I would SSH to the console, use kubectl to get the exact version of the image.
I have one question there, because I think I looked into the documentation for setting up connections via kubectl, and I think we have at least 3 different methods now. So one would be to go to the console server and have your setup there, right? Then people are suggesting S-shuttle, and then there's this other thing to use set up an SSH tunnel and use HA proxy, the HTTP proxy with a WebSockets connection, SOCKS 5 connection. And so, what would be the preferred method to do that?
As far as I know that Devin has been working on these dedicated developer console machines, and my previous thought was that we're waiting until that work is complete, and then once that work is complete, we'll all be connecting the same way to the Kube API. Could be wrong.
Ah, cool.
I think that's like the medium term plan.
And
for
so
now, you're right. I think like I use
methods should work. Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with the shared console, right, is that it's a shared VM that multiple SREs are on. So there's potential security concerns around that. Not saying tunneling is much better, but I think you're right that many different people use different methods. But let's say for whatever reason we can't use kubectl. Does anyone know other ways we can determine without using kubectl what version is running in the cluster?
I mean, what I would try to do first always is look into the announcement Slack channel to see what is supposed to have been deployed and which environment. And then for figuring out versions, I would try to look into Grafana first, where I'm not very sure if we have this information right there. So I would probably go to the Grafana overview thing for Sidekick and see if we get some version information there, but I'm not sure if we have that there. I mean, that would be the way I would probably go in an emergency first, because I wouldn't be sure how to do the kubectl way that Michael mentioned right now out of the box.
Sure. So the first thing I'd like to highlight is the new event log that we have. We have a link. Can you guys still see my screen or not? Sometimes it doesn't work. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Cool. So there's this link on every incident, view recent production of deployment configuration events. If you click this, this will show you for all of like the deploy events. And you can see like, here's an example of a K8s deployment. Here, if we, it tells you the version. So this is like the image tag. So this would be one way you could get it. Put this in the agenda here. I think we can improve. Obviously, like the best way would be just to go to Grafana to see. You have annotations, but they're not really easy to look at. If you want to look at Sidekick specifically, and just let me know if my screen is still sharing, because sometimes
it's fine.
I'm amazed. Okay. We haven't incorporated these into the general service dashboards, but we have pod info dashboards, and maybe you've seen this before. So if you go to Sidekick pod info, you wait. Yeah, I think there's like a really busy graph here on usage, which is why it takes a long time. As soon as this loads, yeah, this graph is not meant to have so many pods. Like it's really too busy. It's having trouble. But we can just look at the active version, and then we'll turn off all these like annotations. And then we can go back like 2 days. So here is like, if you just want to look at a very specific deployment and want to see what versions are running on the cluster, this is where we have it graphed in Grafana. You can also look at Thanos to get this as well. I'll put a link to this.
I just noticed when going to the Sidekick overview dashboard, you have links to Kubernetes details like containers detail and deployment detail, which is nice, but it doesn't show the version, right? I think. So if we would have a link there also for the pod info, that would be a good improvement, I think. So that you have one place from a service to get to this kind of information, right? Because else I would need to remember that there's a pod info dashboard that I could look into.
Yeah, the idea here is that the pod info dashboard came first, and I think we're planning to deprecate it. What we probably better to do is just to add the version info to the deployment dashboard since it's useful. So maybe let's open an issue.
I really like the Grafana approach. And I'm curious about the events log in Elastic. It's fairly new, and I haven't used it a lot. And I'm curious, like, how does it expose things like failed deployments, or how do we see if a deployment actually contained a change to Sidekick?
So, no. It doesn't track failed deployments, nor can you be absolutely certain that the code. So yeah, maybe event log is not the best tool to use. I think we have to decide whether we want to we could probably, this is hard to do in CI, but we could probably figure out a way to capture the return code of the Helm command and then post that to the as an event and then fail the job or something like that.
I think that the event log is still useful just to get a high level overview of changes. Like, I'm not dismissing its value. I'm just like trying to learn it to get the maximum amount of value out of it.
Yeah, we should probably make sure that's clear. The docs for this is I'll link to them.
And what about figuring out what changes were included in the deployment? Would I have to go to each individual deployment to figure that out, or is that already exposed in the event log?
It was thought that we would expose that eventually in the event log. So yeah, I guess that's part of this question. Does anyone have ideas on how we would get a list of changes, or what would you do now to find a list of changes for, given that you have like an image?
I would take the version, the hash from the image, and look at the announcement channel to find the actual deployment. Or in case of the event log, I would go to the deployment. The pipeline is available there, so that would get me to the pipeline and work my way from there. I think there's a link in the description that links to all the changes. In the description of the MR, or the pipeline generated by the deployer, I think.
So unfortunately, it's not that straightforward, because what you're seeing in the pipeline, you're seeing like the changes to the deployer project, not the changes to the GitLab or GitLab project. Henry, do you have an idea of how you would see the list of changes?
Not right now. That's exactly the thing that I can't remember always.
Sure. Yeah, it's not straightforward. I think what I would do personally would be I would go to this Grafana dashboard, and I would take a look at the SHA, and then I would just do a diff of the GitLab or GitLab project. So I would do like a compare. If you you may see like these links in the auto deploy status, like something like this.
Didn't we also have something in the announcement channel, or the other deployment delivery channels that we are using? Wasn't there somewhere a link to all changes in a release? I think there was something like that in one of the Slack channels, right?
So whenever we do an auto deploy status, which happens in the upcoming release channel quite often, we generate a summary of what's deployed to each environment, and then there are diffs between the environments. So maybe that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah, right. That was the one I was looking for. Yeah.
So let's use this as an example. Let's say we're going from this blue deployment to this green, blue-green deployment. No, it's not, but the colors is like from blue to green. So oops, reversed it. So we're going from this image to this image. what we should be able to do is just copy the SHA. Space in there. Crap. Stop. I'm not sure why this is not working.
One question in between to Michael. You mentioned that you would use kubectl to look at the deployment versions, right? So what command would that be exactly?
I guess it's Sidekick, so I think it runs in both the regional and zonal clusters, if I remember correctly. So the first thing that I would do is I would figure out if Sidekick is actually running in the cluster that I'm connecting to. So it would probably be kubectl, select the GitLab namespace, so kubectl-n GitLab, and then git deployments. And that will give me a list of all the deployments in the GitLab namespace. So then I would find the Sidekick one, and then do kubectl-n GitLab get deployment, the name of the Sidekick deployment, -o YAML. And then I would probably, just because it's easier to then do some automation around it, like around JQ, etc. Yeah, and or describe deployment to see if there's perhaps an ongoing rolling update.
Okay, thanks.
So going back to the example, if we're going from this image to this image, here's the compare link. What does anyone notice like something a little bit off about the compare link? You might like see this security. Could you think of why we have to use the security group?
Because it was a security release.
Yeah, exactly. It could be a security release, I guess, is the answer, because we always create the auto deploy branches in the security group, and you're guaranteed to have the changes in the security mirror. There are 3 mirrors of the GitLab project. You have there's 3 projects for GitLab. There's the canonical, which is GitLab or GitLab, which gets mirrored to security security GitLab, and then that gets mirrored to where we do the package. So I guess you could say the GitLab project under the security group is where you typically want to look for revisions, because it's guaranteed to be there. It'll probably be in just regular GitLab org GitLab as well, but not always, depending on whether, if it's, for example, if it's a pick into an auto deploy, because we only have the auto deploy branches on the security group, then it's only going to be there. So that's the place you always want to look. I definitely think this could be improved, because I think if you, there's all sorts of like opportunities like to mess this up. Like if you didn't know that, you might be looking at the wrong project and you might not see the SHA. So if we look at that compare link, like these are the changes that went into the Sidekick deploy from this blue version to this green version. Any questions about this?
Is there any other way of getting those changes? That you can think of? Like, it's fine if there isn't. I'm just like curious, what other options we've got.
As far as yeah, the other options would be if you're promoting, if it was a recent, I would say there's no better way right now. I was going to say, like, if it was a recent promotion from staging to production, you could look in the back scroll and see if anyone did an auto deploy status, which would then tell you, like, which would just give you the differences between the staging and the production environment before it was promoted. But I think by the time it's promoted, you really are just going to have to construct this link yourself. So you need to first determine the version that was running before the current version, and then you have to remember, like, okay, what project do I need to look at? And like, you have to construct this compare link. That's a lot to remember at 2 a.m. in the morning at Mikkel's time on a Saturday.
But couldn't we not run auto deploy a status command right now to figure this out?
You could, but it wouldn't show you. It wouldn't give you the right compare link, because it would show you a link, the difference between staging and production. Staging is like the newest version.
I see.
Right? Like or the what is about to be promoted, not the old version. So yeah, that doesn't really help.
An enhancement to this command, like comparing the last two production deployments or something like that. I mean, if that is the way where we have automation to construct something like that to make it easier already, then
yeah,
maybe, because I already can see that people who are not always doing deployments will have a hard time to remember this information, I think. So maybe that would be a nice issue to create for the delivery team, to get this into this chat command with some, I don't know, enhancement maybe to compare the two releases for one environment.
I guess maybe even a link in the event log to that is this exact link to the security project with the diff between the shots would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, the tricky part of this is like knowing what version you're coming from and what version you're going to. We would need to add some extra logic to, before we do the upgrade, we would need to inspect what version is currently running, and then.
But then the announcements channel would be better, even, because there we see for each deployment, right, the information that we started the deploy pipeline and everything. So there we have the information from where we are coming and where we are going to, right? So I guess there we could get this information into then, and then you would see it without needing to run a command to get this information, maybe.
Yeah. I think we would need to figure out when, like, maybe we could do it on the leader of the first node in every fleet. Yeah, I don't know whether it's better to do this in announcements. I think the problem with using announcements is that we would end up spamming the channel, because you have a version upgrade for every fleet, API, web, and then Git Kubernetes, Sidekick Kubernetes, GitLab shell, but they're all the same version change. So we could either just pick one, say like, okay, we pick web, or we just pick the Kubernetes cluster and then generate a link from that. Or we spam the event, or we add messages to the event log. I think it could go either way on that. Maybe the event log starts to be our SSOT for this sort of thing, instead of the announcements channel, because I think that is a little bit easier. One thing I like about the event log is that the times are UTC, whereas in Slack, I don't think it's possible to change your times to UTC.
Good point. Yeah.
But I think I like the idea of having to the auto deploy status. It's a bit tricky. I'm not sure how we would do that. Like, we could source the version data from Prometheus maybe to kind of see what was the previous version and just generate a link from that. I'm not sure.
In the events that we see in Grafana, do we also see the from where to where we are going, like version to version? No,
no, we don't. No, you mean the annotations in Grafana?
The annotations, yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't.
Okay, that's a nice issue to work on, I guess.
Yeah.
Improve that then. Yeah.
Cool. Are there any other questions or comments about this?
This has been really useful.
I'm glad you found it useful, and hopefully some improvements will come out of it. Okay, thanks everyone.